Hello everyone and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight. I've been with RICS for over 13 years now, and my role is to sit within our thought leadership and analytics area of the organisation and look at the impact of AI, data and tech right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 of our qualified members working worldwide, right across that whole land and property life cycle, it's clearly having a profound effect on the way the built environment operates. Indeed, our members work all the way across from land, planning and development, construction, brokerage, valuation, finance, asset management, building operation, building surveying. So once again, a very rich canvas upon which our members work. And indeed, they also work across all the major asset types, whether that's land itself, residential, commercial in all its forms, alternative assets, and indeed infrastructure. So once again, lots of areas where data and tech is really having a profound effect. And today I'm really excited to have Kate and Johnny join me from Fifth Dimension AI. And I guess there's a clue in the last word of your firm name as to what you're involved in. But before we get into the bits and bytes and the neural networks of this world, it'd be great to have a bit of a brief backstory from both of you. So perhaps if I could start with you, Kate, and a bit of your backstory.
Sure thing. Thanks so much for having us on, Andrew, and it's a pleasure to be here. My career background is not as interesting and as diverse, I think, as a lot of the listenership here. It's quite a bit more random. But today, I am the CEO and co-founder of Fifth Dimension AI, and I got my start really just being interested in language and linguistics. So, as you know, in generative AI, there's a lot of weight put on and interest in why one word is more likely to come after another than some other sets of random words, like let the cat out of the, you might be able to complete that pretty accurately. Yeah. And if I said cup, you might be like, that's not what I was expecting. So I have a PhD in that sort of thing, using statistics to analyze the way that people's brains work in this way. And that gave me exposure to a lot of early work. I say early, which shows my age, because of course machine learning and neural networks far outdate even my birth. But at Stanford, it was its own era then when we were developing technologies like Alexa. And so my kind of edge was realizing that there would always be these fantastic technical innovations, things like generative AI, where the possibility for the commercial application for these technologies to really change everyday people's lives, both professionally and personally, was vast, exciting, and could be activated today, but would take decades, in point of fact, to get to a place where people were ready to engage with it meaningfully, and the technology was meaningfully good enough for people to actually want to buy it and use it every day. So I have been about my career in Silicon Valley first for 10 years, and then in the UK for the past 7, building products that hopefully people love, that make their lives better, that also leverage what's new and sexy coming out of the world of technology. So that's where I'm coming from in building Fifth Dimension AI with Johnny.
Thanks, Kate. Johnny.
So I've got mostly a real estate background. So formerly 17 years working in real estate, kind of data analytics and insight. Although I am from a family of property developers. So I was on site from early teenage years. And a brief detour to study chemistry at university. I came back into the industry as an analyst and was struck by this kind of insight that actually there wasn't much data analysis technology being used, and that maybe I could have more impact on the built place by helping others by building technology through data and analytics. So that's kind of been the theme of my career. I spent the previous 5 years to Fifth Dimension AI at a prop tech called Way Home, where I worked with Kate. Where we were buying homes in partnership with customers, a shared ownership type way of owning a home. But one of the things that, and I've also built technology in-house at businesses like Countrywide, for example. One of the things I think that has punctuated my career, though, is that ultimately most of our workflows in property involve emailing a huge number of PDFs to someone else, who has to read them, write new PDFs and send them back. And ultimately, that's not really something our technology has been able to deal with because of all of that unstructured data. You've just not been able to kind of meet professionals where they were. So fifth dimension AI really is started on that kind of thesis. And the thing that Kate and I get really excited about is that we can reinvent document heavy workflows. So all of these workflows that have been sort of protected by this unstructured data that rely on kind of the personal computer, essentially, email, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Adobe PDFs, can actually be transformed. And we're really excited about that because we think that'll unlock a wave of sort of potential and expertise in the industry to tackle all of the big problems that we've got to deal with.
Indeed, no, fascinating, and obviously, AI has become, a hot topic and captured the zeitgeist. Obviously, recently, I mean, reflecting back on my own career, I mean, I'm going to show my age here, but I mean, I was writing manufacturing systems back in the 80s on what was, what the real estate industry would now consider to be tremendously well-structured data in terms of the way you can look at the manufacturing cycle, and also working with a firm at the time called RICS on things that used to be called expert systems, which has disappeared into the mists of history on the basis of the new versions of AI, but kind of fairly simple algorithmic if-then-else type models that said, okay, well, if we can capture the expertise of a doctor, maybe we can do some branching logic here and build some expert systems. But that was on mini computers that were still measured in a few millions instructions per second, so it was all fairly primitive compared to today. But I mean, on all that basis, Kate, I mean, there's clearly a huge buzz about AI now, not only in the kind of built environment, but more generally. And I guess we have to recognize that buzz in many ways has been created by this huge and fast emergence of generative AI in all its forms. But it'd be great for our listeners, for you to, Kate, to perhaps explain, right, well, what is Gen AI, and why is it different from other technologies that existed before it?
Yeah, and to pick up on what you were just saying there, I think a lot of the technical innovations that this industry has benefited from in the past couple decades have used statistics and used structured data in ways that I think seem really familiar. So generative AI, artificial intelligence, is a particular kind of machine learning, and machine learning has been helping people, let's say, investment firms value assets and predict their valuation over time for many years, or let's try and think about when this particular boiler on this estate is going to break in the next 3 years, and what are the financial consequences of that going to be for my investment in this asset. So those are all great applications, I think, of the maths generally behind things like artificial intelligence. What's really unique about generative AI, and I think why Johnny and I are so excited about it, is that it's not predictive AI. It's not this crystal ball that's supposed to help you make decisions for the future. It's supposed to be able to reason like a human being. And so the exciting applications are, hey, can you not just create some content for me? Yes, maybe this is what a valuation report looks like for me, but can you reason about why this valuation is 11 million pounds and not 12 million pounds? And without me having to tell you, the risk profile for my business includes flagging these risks, that's fine, we'll do that for you. But as someone who knows about the industry, as a domain expert would, having 30 something years in the business, what would you be worried about that might not be obvious to someone on the outside? So I think at Fifth Dimension AI, we're particularly focused on recreating that kind of agentive expertise using generative AI within the industry to kind of supercharge the intelligence of property professionals, rather than them having to use either technology that tells them, the predictions of the future in isolation, or something like ChatGPT, which essentially will function like an intern's level of knowledge about the industry. Yeah. Good at doing a lot of different things, but know things well. So I think those are how we think about the possibilities of generative AI as opposed to other technologies that are out there for property professionals.
Thanks. Now, given we also want to, and I always in these discussions perhaps hammer away at the fact that it's not about technology itself, but technology is a means to an end. So from that perspective, Johnny, I mean, tell us how you envisage people actually using AI now. So you're an investor, a developer. Actually, how can you use the stuff? Because the theory is great, it's wonderful, but actually this is about actually applying it to a sector, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the things we love talking about, because I think one of the biggest kind of gaps in a lot of generative AI content and the hype and kind of is, okay, so what are people actually doing differently today, for what benefit and why? And the reality is to get to that, you need to be working with someone that understands your sector and your industry and your workflows. Because otherwise you're starting from a blank slate of I can do anything a little bit. So what do I do? I'll pick an investor as the example here. But if we take a sort of day-to-day, we imagine an investor buying and operating new buildings. Let's say you're a senior analyst in the investment team. You're responsible for finding deals, assessing them, representing them at IC, getting the legal docs over the line. Maybe that's a couple of jobs, but they're obviously in the smaller investment businesses, you'll have a nice broad remit like that. So we're going to be running multiple deals side by side, and I think the core constraint for them is throughput. Essentially, either you've got enough money and you're saying, how can we find, buy and operate more assets that fit our investment needs? I need to hit my actual deployment target this year, which is always very hard to do. Or they've got less cash and they're really diving down on quality. And the question is, how can I actually free up the time and mind space to get deeper into the risk so that we can really understand this kind of asset potential performance? So if we think about a few tasks that they're going to have that we've got on the desk today, it's hypothetical. They've got late stage development agreement. They're buying a building, on spec. It's 200 pages, material change to the deal. They need to do a cold read to sign it off, essentially. I think it's quite a few changes, so a day's work, day and a half maybe. They've got 5 property investment brochures sitting in their inbox. They need to run through the initial scorecard, run it into the model, see how it comes out. That's a few hours normally for each, so that's another day's work. And let's say they're also looking at a big portfolio acquisition, and the lawyers have flagged that one of the 50 leases looks a bit dodgy. And what should they do? The lawyers are suggesting maybe they should do a read of every single lease, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it's a big problem. So we start with our big 200-page late-stage development agreement. You send it to your AI assistant. I'll use ours as an example. But you send it to your AI assistant. Ours is called Ellie, and ask about the material changes and what's been missed. What you get back is a summary of the material changes, what should have been changes, and maybe flagging a couple of areas for you to deep dive in. So what you actually shift to in that workflow is you shift from, I have a cold read, this is going to take me ages, to I can tactically dip into the important areas of this document, and your 8 hours of sitting down with a red pen and printed paper becomes maybe an hour's review or 2 hours review. You get back to your lawyers with a couple of queries, and that's shipped, happy days. On the same time, you forward those emails with brochures attached to your AI assistant, asking for your scorecards to be filled out, and they come back, and you drop them straight into your model, get an answer, and you know that 3 of the 5 fail the scorecard, so they don't even go in the model in the first place. The next 2 you pass on to follow up, and then let's say the lease problem. This is a really interesting space because it's basically not viable to spend all that money on legal fees, but there might be some big risks in this lease portfolio. Yeah. So what do? Do you spend the money? Do you not spend the money? Do you try and negotiate with the owner to get them to spend the money? But in this instance, you can use AI to answer that question for you. So essentially, your AI assistant reviews every single lease. You have a list of the 5 things you're worried about. Every single lease gets reviewed. Actually, that flags that there's only 5 leases with these specific issues. The legal team picks up those 5 specific leases. Problem solved, done in the same day, not much cost incurred. And then you've got a couple of hours spare in the afternoon. So you go to an event that you wouldn't normally have time for. Maybe you catch up with a couple of developers you've not spoken to for a while, find a new deal opportunity. That's the kind of nearly future now world for some developers that we're focused on.
I guess from quite a profound point, I mean, there's obviously the danger that we shout fire in a crowded cinema here, and people think that kind of AI is going to replace people. But I think it's the other way around. It's around the freeing up of time to do the high value, more interesting part of the job, isn't it? That actually it's sort of ironic that the AI is being used to do the more generic basic tasks, and then the high value piece is retained by the human beings, and we have free time to do other more valuable stuff. So I think that's an interesting takeaway. I guess, and it's a question I often ask of tech partners really is what the kind of feedback loop has been between this kind of incredibly powerful, both almost sort of taking data in and summarizing it and helping you understand it, but also then generating results from it. So you've got this kind of very virtuous circle of turning documents into data, as it were, and then also then producing documents and data on the generative side as well. What's been the kind of experience of your customers in terms of the user interface and the experience, and how they've helped you shape both kind of initial perhaps developments and also that future roadmap for the product?
Great question. I think that the key thing for us is we're very, very, very customer centric. So everything we build and do and create, we want to add that tangible value for the real estate professionals we work with. So that's the kind of yardstick we apply to every problem we're thinking about. Does this solve a material problem, and will this add material value? And actually, that approach has led to some of our design decisions and much of our product philosophy. So our users actually work in an email interface. So Ellie sits behind an email address. So you email her like you would email another colleague. And it's really interesting, that personification of the software is actually really useful for lots of users to get their head around how to work with the technology, because it is a different way of working with technology, right? You're used to saying to a colleague, hey, can you give me a quick summary of this document? Are there any risks in this? Could you get this data and chuck it into the model from here? You're not used to asking, your CRM or Excel or Word to do that at all. So what we found is that using kind of an email interface that's very intuitive and in our customers' workflows already has been super well received. And we get kind of constant positive feedback about that. And obviously that's where a lot of the documents already are, which is quite handy. It's a short route to take that. You just receive an email full of PDFs to passing it on to Ellie to process and work through.
I mean, Kate, going back to you, I mean, even before we pressed the record button today, we were being critical of a product I won't mention in terms of its UX and the kind of user experience or user antagonistic experience of using that particular product. I mean, when you look to the future, and we've got to be, I think, realistic, and I think this is where technology sometimes can fall down generally in lots of sectors, is that the people who use the technology by definition are not technologists. They're going to be domain specialists in a certain, whether it's real estate or whether it might be medicine or aerospace, whatever it is. Where do you see the kind of the journey of the kind of user engagement as an interface, and indeed how will people enjoy using products in the AI space? How's that going to evolve in terms of making sure these things become so easy and so trustable, as it were, and so comfortable that, and I think, as Johnny said, because you're using the email interface at the moment, it's familiar, it's the way we work, we're used to sort of sending documents and attachments and getting things back. How do you see that evolving so that it literally just becomes all pervasive in a good way, and that we don't think, oh, I'm now using AI, I need to think differently, or I need to bring another product in on my desktop and do something different, apart from just being just so part of our normal workflow?
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful way of viewing how technology should evolve and should change people's lives. So I just want to say I really appreciate especially the use of the word enjoy, how important it is that people actually enjoy using the technology. That is a huge part of their work experience, right? As we all spend so much time at work. And also trusted, right? I think that comes up a lot in the AI space. And so I want to talk about those two things a bit. In terms of really enjoying it, if you look at a lot of the other software out there, both in the AI space and outside of it, it asks a lot of people in order to use it. So to your point, let's say I am looking to review a set of leases, abstract some information from them, and then generate a new document summarizing what I think the risks are in those leases for a potential investment committee. Usually that task will involve kind of classifying the data, explaining what should and shouldn't be in those leases in a way that essentially turns property professionals into data analysts, and you practically have to write SQL or Python in order to complete like a basic task, right? So I think part of the genius of generative AI is that it can take that away and say, like, you should be able to talk to your data or to your documents in the way that you can talk to your colleagues. And that, I think, is the first step. And that's part of what people love, as Johnny was saying about Ellie, is that she looks like someone else on your team. She's got a cute little avatar, and you can send her a document and she'll review it just like anyone else would. And she'll come back to you with a very human response. You might even say please and thank you, which is good if we're thinking about a coming world in which AI is running our future. At least we're being grateful along the way for its contributions. Looking forward, I think